because like I said, you'll go out and you'll get punched in the gut and told no and told no and told no. And persistence, I think, was the biggest thing, was waking up, having a plan and saying, this is how I'm going to attack my day. And every day laying my head on my pillow going, I put in everything that I had today that I can go to sleep at night and know that the next morning to have that same plan of attack. So that way I can start building this funnel up that, things will start falling through.
Welcome to the Cincinnati Business Podcast, where we elevate the voices of business owners, nonprofits, and subject matter experts across the greater Cincinnati area. And brought to you by the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cincinnati Business Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Erickson, and with me today is Stephen Huff from Script Coffee. What's up, dude? I'm so glad to have you in the studio today.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me out today.
I love it. Now, we're going to dig into everything about Script Coffee, all the cool things that you're doing now, the things that how you got to this point. But I'm kind of curious more, you personally, what brought you from young man to, hey, I'm going to start a coffee company? Like, what happened there?
That's a really good question. I get that asked quite a bit. So really it started, I worked as a melting manager at AK Steel in Middletown. And
made famous by J.D. Vance's book.
Yes. Middletown, grew up in Westchester and went to college for education, ended up in a steel mill. So I don't know how that all panned out. Pretty random. But,
yeah, that is very random.
Where my love interest for coffee and where that passion really grew from was after I graduated college, I started dating my wife. And my wife is from Brazil. And if you haven't had the chance to ever travel down there, coffee is, it's a whole way of life.
Yeah.
It's the culture, the ritual, every day having coffee with family members around the table. Breakfast was very simple. Past several times I've been down there, you wake up, usually it's fresh baked bread with butter, some fruit, and a cup of coffee. And it's so simple, but fell in love with the whole ritual, coffee. And then as me and my wife were dating, she would introduce me to new coffee drinks. And it's amazing. I kind of regret back in college, like I never drank coffee or relied on caffeine for anything. And then
was it just a dislike for the taste, or just never got into it? Or?
Never got into it. I love the smell of coffee growing up. I think there's a part of me where I remember as a child, my dad would crack open the old blue Maxwell house, and I mean, it would just fill up the kitchen. And there's also that connection too, that like nostalgia piece that connects me to good memories, sitting around breakfast table, dad getting coffee ready for work. And I've always loved the smell of coffee, but anytime I tried it, I just never really cared for it. And as I grew older, my palate started to develop. I started tasting new things. The way I tell the story and how it goes is I came into work one day and I was drinking coffee with cream and sugar. And one day we ran out of sugar. And I was like, man, I really could use a cup of coffee. So I went with cream, and I went, oh, that's actually not bad. And fast forward a couple months, I'm drinking coffee with cream. And then I was on my way into the steel mill. And when I was working there, I was working crazy hours as a manager. Always brought in coffee. We had a coffee brewer in our office. One day I ordered a coffee with cream, and they accidentally served me up a black coffee. And I remember drinking it, like this memories and just embedded in my brain. I remember walking through, taking a sip, going, wow, this is so different. What did they do to this coffee? And I popped the lid and I go, like it's just plain coffee. So from there on, I just started, at the steel mill, I got obsessed with trying different coffees, different origins. At night, I had this whole kit on my desk. I would do pour overs. And what it turned into is I would have off days during the middle of the week. So me and my wife would go around different parts of the city, when our off days fell together, we would actually have it planned out like, hey, we're going to go to this part of town and visit this shop and try this coffee.
That's fun.
And really fell in love with that time that we had together off, but also exploring like what Cincinnati had to offer in coffee. And it's such a unique thing that every place was different. And I think that's what kept us going, was always seeking the next thing that, you know, was around the corner.
Interesting. Okay. So you were seeking the next thing.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, obviously I assume your wife was a part of the influence of this, but like, you're like, well, what if the next thing was us?
Yeah. I mean, that was, as we're going around, and I went to a couple places around town that you could see the roasting. And, when I was working in the steel department, everything was time and temperature. And then I started learning about roasting, and I'm like, it's time and temperature.
Absolutely.
It kind of like translates.
Yeah.
And then I fell in love with, you know, different origin and different roasts, and how I did an exercise one day. It was like WXYZ. And you would cup and taste these different coffees, and each one was so unique when you did it side by side like that. And
Coffee cupping is a crazy experience.
It's insane that, you know, to a lot of the consumers, like, coffee is just coffee. And when you really get into the weeds and learn about coffee, there's so many different cool processes and unique things that are a part of the coffee production, from how the coffee is grown from a soil elevation, and then how it's processed from there. Really what it does is it gives coffee the ability to perform in different ways that, you know, you couldn't compare a washed Brazil coffee versus a natural Ethiopian. They're just two different things.
Yeah. Well, and for those who are listening to us today or watching, we're getting a little bit in the weeds, and I'm excited about it because you and I are both coffee fanatics and actually both coffee roasters. And so this has been, as you and I have talked about off camera, I grew up roasting coffee myself. And so it's always been interesting to kind of experience a small slice of kind of what you deal with every day. Because I never at the scale that you did. It was always like at most like 1,000 pounds in a year is what we did. So like nothing like you going through thousands.
Well, we're on the upward trend, just based on growth. And man, it's I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, I love it. So, but to go back to that, like, obviously coffee is so complex, like, because it, like, from the way I understand it, coffee can literally change flavor between seasons, like grapes can for wine. And how do you, I know that, like, the classic story of Starbucks being a big national chain, the way that they keep everything tasting the same is they overcook their beans.
Yeah.
And how do you maintain and create, well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to know, like, how do you create consistency in your brand as you're growing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your question, one of our, you know, pillars is quality, and trying to, you know, that balancing the quality aspect. And, you know, when you start increasing volume, I've been passionate since day one about everything that I get from wholesale to any orders for groceries. I roast that week. Try to avoid as much as possible of something that's sitting there over time and aging. With coffee, the longer something sits, the more it can oxidize, which can affect the overall performance of the coffee. So one thing that I try to keep at the forefront of, you know, how we do things is when orders come in, try to roast that as fresh as possible, because I think once you get in that window, you know, ideally you want to drink coffee after about, you know, 2 or 3 days after it's rested. If I roast it Monday and then I'm delivering it to your doorstep on Wednesday, Thursday, I mean, that's prime time performance. So really that's a that's something that we try to really, stick to as we grow, to make sure that, customers and what we're getting out there is fresh as possible.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so I jumped ahead. We were going through your story. You're still technically at AK Steel. Yeah. You just had a black coffee. Yeah. And you're like, hey, I don't mind this. This is actually pretty great. Yeah. Which I'm actually impressed also that they had decent coffee.
Well, we had our brewer, so we had to bring in our own.
Oh,
so
okay.
There was a little bit of a trick. We had just a standard bun brewer in our office, but that eventually evolved to a V60 pour over, to where I'm walking in with a kit with, a kettle that's electric.
A little bougie.
And I mean, the guys out there like working in a steel mill, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine a lot of guys give me a hard time, but it's really cool to hear a lot of them that I worked with come out and visit the shop and be like, man, this is I remember you talking about this, and I remember you like dreaming up this, and like here you are. And really that's where the interest for coffee and like just the passion was. Sitting there every night. I would work sometimes third shifts, and I would need my caffeine, and just trying different roasts, different roasters, different origins. And it just became this whole ritual of, I had guys that were longtime Folgers and Maxwell House drinkers, to where it evolved into a labor of love, to where I'm brewing it for myself, and then someone's interest is piqued and they're like, hey, what is that? And I'm like, well, come over here. Let me make you one. And guys,
and then they're hooked.
Yeah, and then seeing their reaction drinking specialty coffee for the first time was like, it was priceless, because they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. And I'm like, yeah, like in education, that's the big other piece, is just educating people. And I went through that whole process at AK Steel of buying books, reading on origin, reading on processes. And then that led to, I ended up working for another company locally, and I started to learn more of like efficiency, black belt, Six Sigma. And really I look back at my past and I go, okay, so I had college athletic background, playing with a team, a unit, learned a ton of things, from my life, from that experience, to heavy operation, to, it was a little bit smaller scale operation with the next company, but it was much more focused on how to run things from a lean manufacturing perspective. Unfortunately, that company packed up and moved south, ended up working sales, and all of that experience really tied into, okay, I have operations experience, I have sales experience, I have the passion and the fuel that's really like wanting me, the drive to tackle this. And really it just allowed me to pursue that and come up with a plan and chase after the dream.
So in a way you could say you wrote your own script.
In a way you could say,
it. That's awesome.
Yeah. I wrote, it was a part of the script.
I love it. So, okay. So then you're in sales. Mm-hmm. What made you say like, hey, I think I can actually do this. I can make my own company and go after this.
So, the story goes, and this is what I love, like when people ask me about the name script, I'm like, everyone has a story. So we gave the background of where the coffee, the love, the passion. Now the other big part of the story is I was sitting around a fire pit group, with a group of guys from church. And one night I was just sharing like it was stirring enough in me to where like I couldn't, like everywhere I went, I just sharing the idea of like, hey, this is what I thought. And I with friends and people, bounce ideas and get thoughts. And I share the idea one night, and the next morning I got a text from a number, and I didn't know whose number it was. And it was from my business partner, Jeff. And he was like, hey man, like your passion, the things that you want to do really resonated with me. Like, let's set up a time and sit down and like, let's do this. And one of the other guys in the group was a graphic designer, and the three of us just came together and collabed on this project of which is now Script Coffee.
Dude, and here we are drinking a little bit of your Buckeye drink.
Yes.
Buckeye blend. Why did I just call it Buckeye drink? That's terrible. That's like a sports drink or something. Like, that's not coffee.
So this just happens to be conveniently Script Coffee, Script Ohio. It's the Ohio blend. So.
I love it. Yeah, it's so good. And I have to say, well done.
Thank you.
You nailed it.
Thank you.
Out of pure curiosity, I'm not going to ask your mixture, but what makes up this cup?
So in this one specifically, it is a blend of Brazil and Sumatra.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So, okay. Now, your wife wasn't involved in coffee in Brazil other than it being an ethnic.
No. So my wife, both of my in-laws, this past trip down there, I found out both of my in-laws were born at coffee plantations. And it was really cool because this last trip that I went down, like I was in the coffee industry. So me going down to Origin, hearing stories from my wife's family. Yeah. It was incredible to hear, like, her grandfather used to source the soil from where they would plant coffee plantations. They live right on the border of, my in-laws now live right on the border of Minas Gerais and Sao Paulo. So Minas is a huge coffee production state. Elevation, the mountains and the area really help bring high quality coffee. And so my wife's grandfather, her parents were born on the plantation, but she's had uncles that work in the coffee industry. And just going down there and visiting and hearing all these stories, it's amazing that that little, bean or seed, whatever you want to call it, takes that journey of traveling from, those countries of origin to here in Cincinnati in our cup.
That's so good. I love it. Now, did she kind of roll her eyes like, oh, I'm stuck in the coffee business again when you guys started launching into Script?
No, I think she was a big inspiration because she was the one that really introduced me to coffee. And I would say that just as long as we've been married, like, she's always given me the right feedback, honest feedback. She loves, the fact that, we own a coffee business. I think the ultimate, moment for her is, if we could ever get her full time, working, at the roastery or the shop. Cause I know she's super proud of, Brazilian coffee in particular, but just the whole family lineage of being involved in the coffee industry. She just coming here to the States, she loves showcasing and, letting people know that Brazil's our number one seller.
That's great. That's great. So let's get into some details a little bit about what Script does, because obviously you guys have been around for a while now.
Yeah.
But your shop that you currently have is actually fairly recent, if I'm correct, because I visited you guys maybe about 5-6 months ago now.
Yeah, it was probably about 5-6 months.
And I was blown away. Like we were talking about this off camera. Like, I love that you place your roaster easily visible for us to, like, as we walk in and see it. And here I am like, oh, what's he got? What's he doing? What's he doing back there? And it was so great that you invited me back. It was so much fun. But like, tell us a little bit about like what the journey's been with Script. Because obviously you've done some cool collaborations over the years. You've done some really cool stuff, and you're kind of flexing into a new kind of phase of what Script Coffee looks like.
Yeah. So after we met, put that business plan together, one of the owners at Sonder Brewing, Justin F's, a great friend of mine, we ended up connecting with Sonder and actually leased some space on the second floor where we would actually we actually started our roasting production. And it was kind of, looking back at it, it was it was super unique. And it's cool because it's all part of the story. Like literally you look over and it's like all the offices and everybody's working on their laptop. And then you have me over in the corner and I'm over there roasting. And I'll rewind for a second. Really how we got to that point was during the pandemic, I actually lost my job. And that was really the main, pivotal moment of, all the planning, everything that we've talked about. This was all in the works. And the door opened up during the pandemic and I was let go from my job. And that's the opportunity window that I saw, hey, this is my time. Like it was hard to find anybody that was really hiring. Nobody knew what was going on. And all the experience that I talked about from 8K to, the sales to ops, really it was like that moment that I felt like, hey, tap in, let's go. And went full-fledged into Script Coffee full time. And,
it feels like a common business owner story, like lose their job and just say, I got no other choice. Let's go.
To me, I'm one of those people that I look back at it and I go, I would really beat myself up having that stirring and that passion and never pursuing it and always living in the what if. And when that opportunity came about, I was, I tell people this little side story. One of our most popular coffees is 330. And a lot of people are like, what's the meaning behind it? So that's what's in our espresso blend. And a lot of people, what's the meaning? Like, what is 330? And then for a while I was like, it's there's no better time for an afternoon pick me up than at 3:30 for like an espresso shot. And everyone's like, oh, okay, cool.
That's late for me, man. That'll keep me up till midnight.
But the real story behind it, and now where I'm at, I'm more comfortable sharing it. But the real story behind it was when I was terminated from my job, my meeting was at 3:30, and that's when the dream was alive. Was after that 3:30 meeting, I went full time at Script and haven't really looked back.
Dude. So your most popular blend is
now
330.
Our most popular blend. We sell 330 at Whole Foods and at the shop, and it's really taken on to people love it. And so and most people don't even know the story behind that.
That's crazy, man. We're making news here today. I love it. This is great. Man. Okay. So you're in Saunders, you're doing all this roasting, and I would assume because of the pandemic, a lot of people are looking to buy coffee for their house but a lot of people would say, like business owners are saying, pandemic's no time to start a business.
Well, that was one thing that really jumped out is, I would go around and I'll never forget this. I would load up my car full of samples, had business cards, and I just started knocking on doors. Any place that was open, that I could get in. And I kept hearing the same, repeated story of, I don't even know if we're going to be here in 2 months. The last thing I want to do is switch up my coffee to somebody else. And it just seems like a major change. And with everything going on and the uncertainties, it's a no. And in that time of getting told no and no and no, and it was the same case each time I would go visit somewhere, the light bulb came on and I'm like, well, to your point, where's everybody at? They're at home. So, getting the online store up and running was a big part. But then I saw it like, hey, where we were at Sonder Brewing, Whole Foods was right across the street. Hey, let's get into grocery stores. Saw that as a really good opportunity because that was one thing during the pandemic was either you were at home or going to get groceries.
Yeah. But that's a big punch for you to be able to just start and say, now let's go to Whole Foods right away. That's crazy.
So it was something for me that I would go in and it was just a true, honest conversation. And I would tell, some of these buyers and be like, hey, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing. And here's a sample. And this is, I'm here because I love coffee, but I also want to find opportunities where I'm getting told no, trying to find different avenues to where we can get script coffee out in the market. And Whole Foods really was one of the first ones that brought us in Mason. And since then, it's, it started in Whole Foods Mason to across the city, to Kenwood, Dayton, up to Columbus, Cleveland, and Indianapolis. And
dude,
that was something that, looking back at it, it was having to really focus on that during the pandemic and going, where are everybody's buying habits were so different than the norm, just based on the circumstance. So that's where we turned our attention to and started on a grocery shelf before we started anywhere, really.
That's so smart. And it's amazing that worked. Like, I mean, I've never worked in what I would consider probably the CPG industry. Like that is completely foreign to me. And so I kind of love like how you're just like, nah, let's just do it. Yeah. Like, let's just go. Let's just see what happens. That's so cool. And I was thinking about too, your brand is just so awesome. Like I feel like it stands out on a grocery store shelf.
Yeah. James Bailey, who's one of the other parts of this, really when we set out and created, script and, the whole meaning behind the name, people ask me that too. That's another question that comes up is, why script? And, on the back of the bag, you have the farmer to the roaster to the consumer, and each individual one has their own script essentially. And all three of those scripts are connected to the same story, and that story is coffee. So when we were working on marketing and branding, we were like, let's create something that is simple, clean, and, really has a good meaning behind the name of, what we're trying to accomplish.
And I think a whole nother level to that is coffee is one of the most, coffee or beer are the most shared drinks during conversations where people are sharing their own stories, like where they've come to. We're doing the same right now. Like so I love it. That's a cool twist on the name. But even on top of that, the brand just feels like it's a national brand. Like it feels, but yet it's a hometown thing. Like I love it. That's great.
That was one of the questions that, and I take it as it's like one of those like double-sided compliments where you're like, thank you, but we would have a lot of people come in when we first opened up, and we're just on the north section in Lebanon. And when we were searching for places around the city, this opportunity came up, and it's a great spot, the location, what the city of Lebanon's wanting to do with the downtown. They put in pickleball courts that our drive-through wraps around, and pretty much people would come in and they would say, hey, so did you guys buy a franchise of Script Coffee? And that's like, and I'm like, I take it as like, no, but like we are the franchise, but thank you. I took it as like either it's like too well done that you had to have bought this from somebody's idea.
Well, they've also seen it, like, I mean, during the pandemic, at least. I know that you guys are not on shelves as much as you were in the grocery stores anymore, but like they probably saw you on shelves and recognized you, and they're like, oh, no way, we have one local now.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, initially from where we were on the grocery side, it's evolved into Jungle Gems now, Clifton Market, some other local grocery stores.
Oh, great.
And that's something that we're really still to this day that we are focused on because, a lot of people brew coffee at home, and that's something that we have a vision and focus of how do we get our product on more grocery stores in the Cincinnati area to really showcase and show off what makes Cincinnati special.
Well, speaking of that, one of the things that you're super passionate about is the idea of local local coffee, and probably more than just coffee. But when we were talking off camera, you were talking about the idea of like, you want the local coffee community in Cincinnati to be so good that Starbucks doesn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a really interesting concept. Can you kind of share kind of your heart behind that?
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
One of our, we talk about the pillars and, kind of who we are. One, is quality, but the other one that really stood out and it was a part of this project was accessibility and convenience. And that's when we were coming up with the idea of the cafe, one thing that we really were close-fisted on was, it has to have a drive-through, especially at where we're at in our location. We have to make the coffee that we are producing or roast. We're not producing, but what we're roasting, and extract the what we're showcasing in the drinks, accessible to the consumer. So by having a drive-through, we've heard so many win stories from the mom with 4 kids that doesn't want to, park and yank them out of the car to get her coffee in the morning, to senior citizens that are unable to really get out of the car. It's a little bit of a stretch for them to park and make their way in based on, physical barriers. So by putting that drive-through in, it's really kind of lifted up the barrier that was preventing people from, that normally wouldn't come indoors. They would normally drive down the street and go to a Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, big box chain. Now we've given them a reason to come to us because we're going to make that doorway, a little bit more wider for them to approach it.
That's interesting. So would you say that like a classic issue with a small town brand in general, because we've got a lot of people who are from all sorts of industries who watch this podcast. And so would you say that is a common issue for a lot of their consumers, that like their product is just not accessible enough?
I don't know if I know the answer specifically. I know just where we're at in our market. We're attached to a downtown that has walking, you can shop store to store. When you expand that down into like Cincinnati, you have a lot of coffee shops that, are walk-in. You have to find a place to park and walk in. And just from our research and watching what's unfolding in the suburbs is coffee as a, from a local aspect. What I noticed, and that was another thing, like, when I would travel to AK, when I was at AK Steel, we would travel into the city. A lot of the coffee shops were just in a certain radius of the city. And you would have some, like every neighborhood would have like their shop that was unique, but what every neighborhood has and has a lot of, Starbucks. Just where we live up off the South Lebanon exit, I want to say there's 3 Starbucks within a 2-mile radius.
Oh.
And there's one at the Target, there's one at the Kroger, and there's a standalone drive-through. And really, that was a big thing for me when I was, looking at how we're going to do this and make it, in the suburbs and writing up a business plan. You have to remove that barrier for people that normally wouldn't come see you. Like, you have to remove that barrier so that way they have the same convenience as if they were to go down the street to a Starbucks. And the other driving factor, that's going to separate us from something like us versus Starbucks or Dunkin' is just the quality and how we source our coffee.
Yeah.
Will stand out.
Well, and no shade to Starbucks. They've created an amazing business model that people love. Yeah. And I think the cool thing is they give you so many ideas for how local could be better. Yeah. Like, I think you and I were talking about, you guys are currently working on an app where people can like order ahead and stuff like that. Is that a thing?
So that's something right now that we're working with our POS software. I had to give them a shout out because they are so awesome to work with. It's called Dripos, And yeah, Drippos.
Are they specifically for like coffee shops?
So they starting out, and I've got to meet the guys at one of the coffee expos, but they were specifically from like small cafes, and I know they've evolved and taken on other projects like some restaurants, but they have been hands down, you know, when we sit there and we look at things and decisions that we made, we're like, this was one of the best decisions that because, you know, as a business owner, you know, you're looking at all these things where you have to allocate and budget on, and it can get a little intimidating in the POS world. And you have all these different, you know, services and programs and, you know, software and technology. And I spent hours, you know, comparing and literally Drippos, their customer service is on point. They're great to work with. And one thing that they do that we're looking into is we're looking to launch it in January, but we'll start out by having a link on our website to where people can order ahead. That way orders, you know, if you're driving, you don't want to wait in the drive-thru and you want to park in and run inside and grab it real quick. Where that idea came from is I'll go around and go to Starbucks and they cleared out their whole bar top and they labeled it, you know, A through H, H through, you know, so on. And there's just drinks sitting all on top that people are either 20 minutes away and they're going to order their drink and it's there ready for them. And Drippos has created they have that platform where we'll be able to order ahead, but also, you know, we're working with them on getting an app to where you download it on your phone and you can log into the app, order Script Coffee from an app, and have it right there ready for you.
Dude, that's awesome. See, that's the thing. The majority, if not all of the local coffee shops just don't do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a, and it's a different, you know, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but, you know, local coffee shops, really, it just depends on, you know, your model and what your business plan is. And I think one of my favorite things to do was to go into a shop and really connect with the barista and them share the story and tell, you know, the origin story and the coffee and how, you know, they're going to brew it, and really get immersed in that, you know, ritual of learning. But a lot of the time I found out, you know, when I was working in corporate America, I didn't have 25, 30 minutes to do that every morning, but I still wanted a good cup of coffee. And that's, you know, where we've looked at it as, okay, like let's try to knock two birds out with one stone. Let's give people, you know, a great experience from the customer service side, but also getting them a really good quality cup of coffee, you know, whether it's through the drive-thru or order through an online app. They're going to walk away from that and say, wow, this is different than what we're experienced out in this area. So
that's cool. Now, so you guys have been around for how long now?
So
I guess it was 2020.
2019.
2019.
Yeah. So we knew the pandemic was coming. So we started.
Yes. Don't blame you. Yeah.
So we started, our first event was on a Black Friday event in 2019. And then you fast forward and then pandemic. So yeah, 2024. So we've kind of, as we've evolved, we had the wholesale side and, you know, we're looking to grow that. And one thing that was, you know, us as owners would really hold that we wanted to present was, hey, let's have a place, a building that we can also showcase from a drink aspect outside of, you know, just the coffee. The coffee will shine through the espresso, through the drip coffee. But let's have a space that we can create that says Script Coffee and attaching it to the roastery where people can see the transparency and see us roasting it in the room next door. It's been a journey to say the least, but it's been one of the most rewarding things I think, you know, I've done this far. So,
dude, that's so cool.
Yep.
I mean, to come through the pandemic
mm-hmm.
and actually have quite a successful business like on the other side. That's incredible. And then to be a roaster who's all about wanting to have a coffee shop, but you didn't even do that until a couple of years later. Yeah. Like that's kind of nuts. Yeah, that's a weird trajectory.
It was very weird because a lot of the time you see this trend, you'll see cafes that evolve into, hey, let's get into the roasting for ourselves. You know, you see that trend a lot. We started wholesale and we were like, hey, we're on the grocery shelves. We're creating a customer base that's seeing us on the shelves, and like, let's build that up. And then, you know, as far as finding like where we were going to plant that shop, you know, we were actively searching, and we, you know, Lebanon, like I said earlier, the city and what the city is wanting to do, just the development and the growth in that area. We would hear people, you know, oh, Lebanon's already has, you know, 3-4 coffee shops. And I always, you know, combat that with, you know, the Starbucks thing, you know, hey, just down the road, you have 3 Starbucks within 2 miles, but, you know, coffee's the number traded to commodity on the market behind oil. And I always tell people when I hear, oh, there's too many coffee shops here, I say, well, why don't you ask that same question about why is there so many gas stations? And
there's usually a massive market for it. That's why. Yeah.
So a lot of people, you know, when they say Lebanon, we love the town, we love where we're at, and really it just all of us combined on the ownership group, we're just like, this is it. This will be the origin for where we'll wholesale and have a cafe.
That's cool. Okay, so let's look at the next 3 years of Script Coffee. So you mentioned to me that you're starting to do a little bit more wholesale work. Mm-hmm. Like, I assume that means like getting into more coffee shops and being their primary roaster and other things like that. But like, what else does that look like? And even probably some of the people listening might be a customer for you. So who are you trying to connect with to potentially share your coffee?
So right now, our big focus is online sales. I think there's definitely an opportunity right there, you know, a shop that's 24 hours that lives on the internet, really leaning into that from the online perspective. Definitely wholesale. So, you know, we love when I tell people, you know, when you partner with us, you know, I don't want this to be oh, here's your coffee, I'm out the back door. I always tell people, especially people that are getting into coffee that don't really know much about it, to use me as a resource. Like, I'm here to support you. So working with wholesale clientele that, you know, are maybe introducing coffee that they haven't before, working closely with those wholesale partners on ways, you know, we can take some of the data and say, hey, we've seen this work up in Lebanon. Let's try this here. You know, let's try this here. And really growing with some of those accounts. So I've seen a lot of restaurants recently have been kind of flipping that switch to weekend brunches. They're saying, hey, you know, we offer lunch and dinner. We're paying for the space. Why not do some kind of brunch menu? Like, you know.
Yeah. I'm a big brunch fan, so I love that.
I know a lot of people love brunch. And so we're seeing, you know, some, you know, restaurants enter into, you know, starting coffee programs. And then one other one, we're working with a local company that, again, it goes back to like the accessibility and making, you know, where you can get Script coffee easy. There's a local company that has, it's a brew to cup, grind to cup. And it's a machine that you fill up a hopper full of beans. You can do all kinds of different specialty drinks, drip coffee, and it says, you know, proudly serving Script coffee, touchscreen, and they've been targeting a lot of offices in the Cincinnati area.
And didn't you mention something too about like trying to target the airport at some point? Like you were trying to get into the Cincinnati airport?
So that's another, we can get to that one. I'll save that one for last.
Okay, deal.
But it's, you know, if you're in an office setting, and I know right now after the pandemic, a lot of companies are trying to incentivize people like, hey, we're bringing you back, bringing people back to the office. It's one of those things. It's experience. I think that's why you see companies invest in, hey, let's dress up our lobby. Let's dress up this office space. You have happy employees. You create a great experience. You have a great culture. You're going to have employees that do really good, output and production. And, that's where I jump in and go, they'll do even better with caffeine and script coffee. But,
so trying to combine that with your friends that have those machines.
So the machine, the local company, they go around and they will service the machines and offices to where they're literally grinding the coffee, grind a cup, brewing fresh coffee, and you can have it at the office space too. So you don't have to take in your whole V60. But then now we'll get into
or your Speedway big gulp of coffee.
Yeah, so your yeah. But now we'll get into the...
Yeah, so this was interesting, if I remember correctly, because I think it was you and I that were talking about kind of an automated system inside of the airport that you were kind of toying with the idea of.
So
if we're allowed to talk
we can talk about it.
Okay,
we can talk about it.
Okay, good.
They just opened up. They had their grand opening, I want to say 2 weeks ago, up in Mason. And they have been great to work with. It's a co-working site. They have offices that you can rent. And they have at the entryway of their facility is called the Robo Joe. And it is unlike any experience. I've seen them at coffee expos, and I'm fascinated by it because it's the engineering, the thought process behind it. You walk in and it's a 24/7 hour cafe, and it's all your drinks you can order through the touch screen, and it has a robotic arm in the center that will go in between the two espresso machines and crank out drinks.
That's cool. That's cool.
It's a whole experience, and I know that the coffee there is for the people that are leasing space and renting it, but also is a showroom for companies or businesses. And we talked a little bit about. So we work with RoboJoe, but they're really seeing, I don't know if I want to say them in particular, but I've heard just out on the West Coast, I think I want to say San Francisco, I think Boston, I've heard you're already starting to see this trend of automatic, robotic coffee shops. It's like a kiosk in these airports where you have traffic 24/7. And the thing is pretty much ran all through programs, and it hits its sequences, and you go in and order a coffee, and it comes out fantastic. And it doesn't make sense. It's a robot. But the one up in Mason, they're serving our coffee out of, and you can. So we were talking about the app. You can download the app and actually order your coffee from the robot ahead of time. And the robot will have your coffee there waiting for you when you go to pick it up.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, if you follow Revelance online on Instagram, I know they've had some videos, and we've talked about we have on the coffee kiosk, it's probably serving script coffee, but we've talked about really, focusing on and promoting the RoboJoe, because it is a very cool experience watching the robot go to work.
That's awesome. And so is that something that you're hoping that some of your wholesaling might start to get into, where like you work with some of these groups that are putting in RoboJoes?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, with that whole vision of getting in the offices, finding ways where you can really display, our coffee in a convenient manner. So yeah, like if RoboJoe were to, be more present, we would love the opportunity to, have those accounts, whether if it's at the airport, other areas around the city. I mean, I know they're more of a national, like they're looking to grow. I think there's 2 of them up in Columbus at the James, and then maybe the Wexler. They serve different coffees, but it just goes to show you, like, having these things and really planting them in strategic areas and then putting really good coffee in them is just, people will taste the difference.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, well, you're just reminding me because my brother-in-law and I were talking at one point about like vending machines are such a big business, and then potentially the idea of taking fresh coffee, combining it into that vending machine feel, but yet it's just running all the time and it's actually good coffee.
Yeah.
I think that's super valuable.
I think especially in those high traffic situations, you're going to be going through coffee. I would expect a quite a bit of volume, and that's one way. You can definitely, like we were talking about, ensuring, hey, whatever that weekly order is, bi-weekly, getting that fresh coffee, overseeing the process that these machines are delivering that. And the technology nowadays is so advanced too. Espresso machines, especially as they get more automated, really the end result is awesome, and it just keeps getting better. So that's also the exciting piece is the technology advancements in the coffee industry.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our time, but I had really like one last question for you that I think will be really valuable to those who are listening. CPG industry is intense and can be really hard to break into. What would you consider, kind of a two-part question. What was the biggest failure that you had while trying to do this that you learned from? And what's a tip you can give anyone else who's trying to figure out what it means to get into delivering a physical product to people?
Yeah. Something that has really, it's a part of who I am, is just my faith, and presented that opportunity during the pandemic. A lot of things come to mind, you lose your comfy job, something where you feel like all these questions and doubts kind of come in your mind. And literally, if it wasn't for that time to where something looked very dark, that there was a light in that situation. And that's something that I leaned on where, because it's not easy. Like if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah, it's not at all.
And really, so that being number one, but also I think one thing that I've learned, as something that's been a success for me is really who I surround myself with, and finding a mentor, from whether it's in the industry, or someone that has been through circumstances. I always love having a coffee with someone and them sharing their experience. It can be very different. But at the end of the day, it was, just back when I played college football, it's, if you want to play, you have to put in the work. And it sounds very, I don't know, cliche, but it's every day, it's pounding the rock, and it's waking up. You might get told no 100 times, but it's that one yes that gets you juiced up and gets you going, you know what, like there is opportunity in this, and really having the mindset of persevering. Because like I said, you'll go out and you'll get punched in the gut and told no and told no and told no. And persistence, I think, was the biggest thing, was waking up, having a plan, and saying, this is how I'm going to attack my day. And every day laying my head on my pillow going, I put in everything that I had today that I can go to sleep at night and know that the next morning to have that same plan of attack. So that way I can start building this funnel up that, things will start falling through.
That's so good. Our first episode was with a business coach. And one of the things he was talking about is like business itself is kind of boring. Like, because the fundamentals are pretty much the same, and you got to do the same fundamentals every single day.
Yeah.
But eventually you're going to get there.
Yeah. It's something where I always relate everything to football. That's just my mind and like my experience. And football, especially the position that I played, it's very technical, and it seems very small, and it seems very unnatural, but it's every day coming in. And, I used to have a coach. Don't come in the door and say, hey, I'm going to get 100% better. If you can get 10% better, small increases every day, learn from your mistakes, not to repeat those, but also the people you're with, trying to educate yourself. Really, all of those things played a part into that really dark period that was a tough time, coming out and opening a successful coffee business.
That's so cool, man. That's so cool. Well, first, a quick little pitch from our end. We're obviously being hosted inside the Cincinnati podcast studio, and you generously gave us a bag of your coffee. And so if anyone wants to try Script, you can either go up to Lebanon or in some of the local shops in the area.
Yeah, Whole Foods around Cincinnati, Jungle Gyms.
Fantastic.
Find us there.
Yeah, but we will happily make a cup of coffee for anyone who wants to stop by. But why don't you, right there's your camera.
Right here?
Why don't you kind of give your pitch, who you are, what you do, as if people hadn't heard you before this moment.
Well, hello, my name's Stephen Huff. I'm one of the owners of Script Coffee, located out of Lebanon, Ohio. We are a wholesale coffee service with a cafe, standalone cafe with a drive-through. At our shop, you'll find a wide array of different coffee products and fun, exciting ways of us presenting coffees from around the world.
I love it. And they're good at what they do too. I love it. It's so good, man. Stephen, I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you for having me out.
This went so fast. It's like, I can't believe it's the end of the time already. But again, thank you. Glad to have you.
Yeah.
And I hope to maybe have a version 2.0 of our talk sometime. I think this would be fun.
Man.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me out.